Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lambrot Weber, and we have the privilege today to be with the North American Field Secretary of the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, Alfred.
I understand that there have been a number of developments since we last spoke with you. The first of which is here in the Vancouver, British Columbia area. And that is that I understand that in West Vancouver, uh, there's been the discovery of an organization called the 12 Mile Club, brought about by a whistleblowing employee of a yacht club there or some other similar entity. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, this is some information posted at the November 8th, posted at itccs.org. What it involves, Alfred, is something we've known about for a number of years. This club, if you want to call it that, is basically a child trafficking and child killing group. It was once known as the Star Chamber. Now, this was first mentioned by a trial lawyer in Vancouver called Jack Cram. In April 1994, he made an accusation in the BC Supreme Court against three Supreme Court judges that they were involved in trafficking children. He named them. He provided evidence that they were working out of the Vancouver Club, which is the elite club in Vancouver, down on Hastings Street. And he was arrested by the sheriffs. The judge ordered his arrest. He was incarcerated in a psychiatric facility, and all of his evidence disappeared. They ransacked his office while they had him incarcerated. That evidence included photographs of these judges with young boys. Now, Jack Cram made reference to this group called the Star Chamber as kind of an elite judges group that passed young kids around. After 1994, as we became involved in exposing these crimes to the residential schools, we began to get more confirmation of this club working out of the Vancouver Club. And because of the attention brought to bear, we found out now that they shifted the location of the child trafficking on the West Coast here in Vancouver to yachts operating out of both Falls Creek and also West Vancouver. These yachts apparently owned by Catholic businessmen. It was interesting, they're Catholics because we believe there's a tie in there to the Ninth Circle cult. But basically what they do, they're called the 12 Mile Club now because the 12 mile refers to the territorial limit outside Canada, off the shores of Canada. Off that is international waters. And essentially what happens is these children are taken out, they're raped and killed and dumped overboard outside the 12-mile limit. That's why, the colloquial term for that is 12 Mile Club. Now, it's interesting that this person, the latest witness, came forward right on the heels of that disclosure of the Denis Lebel, the Quebec cabinet minister in the Harper government, and his involvement with the Ninth Circle in Rome, which we talked about in the last interview, and that's posted at the November 4th posting at itccs.org. We believe that there's this person is connected in some way to that same story, and they were encouraged to come forward now because of this. We've known for a long time that Vancouver is a major center of child trafficking. UNESCO actually published a report in 1999 naming Vancouver as well as Bangkok as a center where there was this kind of major child trafficking going on. This is just the latest affirmation of that.
Huh. Now, that's very interesting because as a resident of Vancouver, one never hears of that. One hears of Bangkok, but that report has not been made public in Vancouver, and certainly is not made public in a city that now, which on the 15th is holding its mayoral election with goals of being the world's most environmental city by the year 2020. Could you comment on that?
Well, the news is out there all the time. It's just that people's short memory span. Like, for example, there was a reporter with the North Shore News, which is a North Vancouver newspaper. His name was Leo Knight. And I met with him in 1999 when I first began to do this research, and he said everyone knows about the Vancouver Club. There was an attempt by our newspaper to bring this story out. And in fact, they had the Vancouver Sun and the province interested in, in the Vancouver Club child trafficking network. What happened was the editors of those newspapers were then hit by a writ by these judges, claiming basically that they were going to sue them out of existence if they tried reporting the story, and the story was never done. So there had been attempts by reporters and lawyers to surface this, but each time it gets buried. I remember an anecdote told me by Dr. Jennifer Wade, who was a witness at my defrocking by the United Church. She's the one who actually brought in a lot of the media coverage of how the church was railroading me out after, I began to expose the residential school crimes. Jennifer Wade actually spoke at a gathering. It was if you remember, I think it was 2006, there was a world forum in Vancouver, international forum, and Jennifer Wade spoke at that, and she mentioned the Vancouver Club there, and it was very interesting. She said that after she gave her talk about all the evidence about the child trafficking and even child murder going on out of the Vancouver Club, a retired policeman came up to her and said, and this is right from Jennifer's mouth, she said that the policeman said to her, "I'm going to follow you out of the building and cover your back because after you mentioned the Vancouver Club, it's not safe for you here." Huh. And, we get that stuff all the time. I mean, I've talked to Noah Little. He was a reporter with the Drum newspaper. That's a native newspaper. He actually followed limousines taking children from the Squamish Indian Reserve to the back of the Vancouver Club on Friday nights. And he actually was interviewing some of these kids. They were 10, 11, 12 years old. They were leaving the Vancouver Club at about 3 in the morning. And he interviewed them, and then somebody hit him on the head and took away his tape recorder. I mean, these incidents happen regularly, but of course they're blacked right out of the mainstream. We went with all of this information to the Georgia Straight newspaper. They wouldn't print it. I mean, there's a lot of pressure to keep this stuff quiet.
Now, my understanding is that only a few years ago, the Vancouver Club was a venue which the former vice president and former president George W. Bush and his vice president used to visit regularly. Is that not the case?
That is the case. Dick Cheney was actually scheduled to speak at the Vancouver Club, I think just a year or two ago, and because of all the protests planned there, I think he stopped the engagement. But what's interesting is none of the protesters raised the fact that the Vancouver Club is notorious as a haven for child rapists. And it's a private, members-only club. You have to be invited to join. There's been a whole history of trying to expose this stuff there. But like I say, the heat that we brought to bear over the last number of years about what went on there caused the shift to go on. Now, this trafficking is going on off these private yachts. And which,
yes,
obviously it's an easier way to dispose of kids and hide the whole thing if you're in a boat rather than in a building somewhere.
Yes, and in fact, one of my colleagues, who I've known, who I had known for almost 30 years, a gentleman, a very distinguished and gentleman by the name of Splitting the Sky, Takajawiya, was heading up those protests at the Vancouver Club. And shortly after that, he was found dead under suspicious circumstances. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, I knew Splitting the Sky. We actually spoke at a number of conferences together. And I know that he had said that to me on a few occasions, that, he was helping track how the stuff that went on in the residential schools was still going on. It was happening off the reservations, especially in North Vancouver. He came across the same stuff we had. And so I think it's, like in Canada, if you're an Aboriginal person, it's easy to kill you and get away with it.
Well, now we have this whistleblower who has come forward, who has identified the 12 Mile Club operating on yachts that are out of False Creek. For those who are not familiar with the Vancouver area, False Creek is kind of an inlet off of Vancouver Harbor that goes right into the downtown of the core of Vancouver. And West Vancouver is on the other side of Vancouver Harbor, and it's mainly homes of the upper middle class and very well-to-do homes. Why do these, and so what you're saying is that it appears as though the patterns are that these ninth circle sacrifices take place on these yachts, and they dump the bodies overboard. Is that it?
That's right. That's their modus operandi for sure. I wanted to point out to people too that at our website itccs.org, if you go into the right-hand column, you'll see one of the if you go down, scroll down a bit, you'll notice there's a thing called Memorandum on the Organized Disappearance, Torture, Exploitation, and Murder of Women and Children on Canada's West Coast, a summary from eyewitnesses. That was posted in February 2011, and that has the description of statements from 6 eyewitnesses, including a woman who called me up when I still worked at Co-op Radio. Her name was Annie Parker, and she met me in the downtown core of Vancouver. She talked to me for several hours about how she had been kidnapped by the police into this thing called the hooker game, where they basically grab prostitutes off the street, they drug them with scopolamine or some other barbiturate, and then they film them in sex films. But what happens is when these women talk and they start spilling the beans, if you like, they're used in snuff films. And she named the locations of these snuff films where they film people being tortured and killed. She showed me some of the buildings where it happens, right in the downtown east side. And she named names, she named the policemen involved. All of this is stuff. The names are right there on that site. So I really urge people to read that. It gives them a lot more of the detail of what we're talking about.
Now, could you name that that organization that issued the report that Bangkok and Vancouver were the 2 leading cities on the planet involving child abuse and child trafficking?
I'll have to look that up, Alfred. It was a committee that had been struck by UNESCO looking into human trafficking.
Oh,
UNESCO.
Okay, good. Yeah.
And it came out, I believe, sometime in 1999, and it was referring to human trafficking. It was up on a website for quite a while. And it said not just Bangkok and Vancouver. It mentioned places like Rotterdam, where they were making reference to the Marc Dutroux case, where there were judges and policemen, politicians all involved in this child trafficking. And they said the same pattern was at work in Vancouver, where you had official kind of under the table support for this stuff, from police and politicians and judges.
Right. Well, let me just for the benefit of the audience, just read out some of the specific names that have been revealed by witnesses attending the meetings of the 12 Mile Club. It says these are meetings during 2007, 2008, where former Archbishop Raymond Roussin and Senior Parish Priest Glenn Dion planned with church lawyers a cover-up of their own involvement in the 12 Mile Club. Who are Archbishop Raymond Roussin and Senior Parish Priest Glenn Dion?
Well, Glenn Dion is the head parish priest at Holy Rosary Cathedral, which is interesting because that's the Catholic Church downtown Vancouver that our group staged numerous protests and actually a very famous occupation that occurred just a couple of months before the apology was issued in 2008. It's one of the things that we believe really got the Catholic Church upset and prompted the government to issue the apology about residential schools. Archbishop Raymond Roussin, that used to be the place he operated out of. He retired very quickly after those church protests. He apparently had a nervous breakdown. And the parish priest, Glenn Dion, was named actually in reference. There was a cook who used to work in the church named Denis Chartier, and he came forward and accused Glenn Dion of having stolen over $250,000 out of the parish fund over 10 years, and the whole thing was covered up by the Archbishop and everything. But in so doing, Denis also told us about the.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I've got. Yeah, go ahead.
Denis also told us that Glenn Dion had been named by numerous parishioners as having been a threat to the children in the parish. But of course, he has a lot of backing. That not that no charges were ever brought against him or anything. Other people named in the 12-Mile Club by this employee who was present at a meeting in the archdiocese where they were trying to cover this stuff up. The diocese employee mentioned Chief Justice of the BC Provincial Court, Hugh Stansfield, which is interesting because John Carton, a lawyer who runs a website called Water Wars Crimes, also named Hugh Stansfield as a child rapist. And as a matter of fact, when the evidence was surfacing that people were going to use in a court case against Stansfield, he died suddenly. Sudden case of cancer. Judges William Esson and Terence Warren of the BC Supreme Court also named. And what's interesting too is and his name keeps coming up all the time, of course, the present moderator of the United Church, Gary Patterson, when he was minister at St. Andrew's Wesley United Church, we had the same reports coming out that he had been named as a member of this, originally the Star Chamber group that had been named as early as 2001. Him and number of other United Church officials, including lawyers John Jessamine and the church official Brian Thorpe. I mean, all of these people, their names are named by various people who don't know one another. And it's like with the residential school evidence, when you have that independent corroboration going on,
Right.
There's something happening.
Yeah. Now, if I could ask you, were you a minister of the United Church?
Yes, I was from 1990 till I was thrown out officially in 1996.
Right. So these were high officials of the United Church that we now have independent witnesses finding out that they're members of the 12-Mile Club, which are possibly Ninth Circle ritual infanticide organizations, and you were thrown out for investigations that you were doing as to possible activities of this sort, correct?
Exactly, and there's a link there, Alfred. It didn't make any sense to me at the time when the church was spending over $250,000 tossing one minister out, and they brooked no opposition. Every level of the church was told, this guy has to go. And it was being organized by these very same people, Thorpe and Jessamine, by a whole clique in the British Columbia Conference. Now, I believe that these people are members of these Ninth Circle affiliated child ritual killing groups. Then naturally they're concerned because I was bringing out how one of the pipelines for the children was coming right out of the Alberni residential school and the Indian residential schools. And this would have exposed their whole connection, their whole operation today, not just in the residential school era, but today. And so I think that explains partly. I mean, this jigsaw is coming together for sure.
Right. Now, so that here we have the Archbishop of the Catholic Church, the priest that is the dean of the Catholic Cathedral in Vancouver, the Chief Justice of the BC Provincial Court in Vancouver, two justices of the British Columbia Supreme Court, the United Church, their national officials. I think you mentioned a bishop, Brian Thorpe, and another one, John Jessamine, and then the moderator of the United Church. I suppose he's pretty high up here in Vancouver. They seem all to be Satanists. What's going on here? I mean, is this like are they being placed in these positions, and unless they play the Satanist game, they're gone? Is that it?
That's right. I mean, it's like the way it isn't just overt blackmail. It's not like pressuring people like they do, like, for example, the Native chiefs in Canada, you can't really become a prominent member of the Assembly of First Nations unless the government has some kind of dirt on you. And they've admitted that to me. They talk, I remember the lawyers telling me that, church lawyers saying, well, none of these guys get into those positions unless we can control them, right? It's the same in the churches, even more so. And these guys all have a checkered past. They're all being part of that same network that I discovered one aspect of it in the Indian residential schools, but it's a whole network that involves these people, and definitely there's children dying on a regular basis because of it.
So that this is really an example of that statement that high office on this planet is actually inside out. It's a reflection of one's station in hell. I mean, I'm just kind of, that if you're the Queen of England, it's because you have high station in hell. You're a high Satanist. Is that what your evidence is proving?
Well, definitely that this has a whole satanic aspect to it. And, when I first began to take down the statements of people who had survived, the Alberni Indian School, where I began to do my research, because I had lived there, the survivors time and again kept making reference to very ritualistic, crimes that went on in the school. For example, the marks, they were the children who were a part of the sex rings within the Alberni United Church School. They were all marked. They described their genitals sometimes being marked, including the girls. In other words, they were being tattooed. That when children were died, they were laid out in a ritualistic configuration, the way they were buried. I mean, you keep making reference to these things. And so you realize, no, this isn't just random abuses. This is a whole system at work, and it has a definite cult aspect to it. I mean, the whole nature of it is definitely can be called satanic.
Well, now, today, the ITCCS, the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State, released and made public all of the records, which are now online, of its first trial in Canada, setting out the genocide in Canada. And I assume that people can see those links at your website, itccs.org. Is that correct?
That's right. After the interview today, we're going to be posting this interview and all the links right at itccs.org. It's the video links come to almost 4 hours of evidence comprising about 150 exhibits. And, I'll give you one example of some of the stuff we discovered. Not only really historic documents, like I exposed back in 1998 how the form that the children, that the parents had to sign that gave away guardianship rights to the church, that was used in all the court cases, proving that the churches and government were legally liable for these crimes. But there's something else we discovered besides the enormous death rates and the records and everything, which are all going to be available there for people to see. These documents showing that half the children were dying in the schools over a half century, not just for a brief period. But we found one document from Alberta in the very first year the residential school opened there, in the year 1891. The very first year it opened, 8 out of 13 of the children died. So, I mean, the question is, if these schools weren't designed to kill off children, then how come over half of them died in the first year? Why was the death rate that huge in the very year they opened? Right. I mean, this is the kind of evidence we're talking about, showing intent to wipe out children.
Right. So let me then, now that we have the evidence of the first Canadian trial, here we have significant evidence of gross violations of international humanitarian law, of criminal law coming forward in British Columbia. It's the very sort of thing that the Brussels-based common law court has been investigated at the Vatican of the UK Crown, of the Vatican. What steps do you think, now that this preliminary due cause evidence has come forward, what steps is going to be taken against these individuals and these networks right here in BC by the various common law courts?
Well, basically, we're hoping to use the publishing now of all of this evidence as a new springboard to take action against these indicted individuals, not just indicted, but convicted. Don't forget that Gary Patterson and some of these other people named were found guilty in this common law court case. You'll see at the end of this video, the third video, a summary of the verdict and the sentence of the court that found not only Ratzinger and the Queen of England guilty and committed to 25 years in prison without possibility of parole. That was the sentence. It also applied to every one of these Catholic, Anglican, United Church officials.
Yes.
And so there is a standing citizen arrest warrant against these people, including Gary Patterson and other church officials.
I see.
Now, we are going to be focusing very much in Vancouver, especially here on the West Coast, to enact these verdicts, to enforce the warrants, and to go and literally arrest these people because they are clearly involved in crimes against humanity. Now, there's all these other things that, when we talked in a previous interview about trying to mobilize people, not just to bring in the evidence, but to actually take action in the community. This is going to be one of the evidence, this is evidence as an important weapon in that whole attempt to rally people to take this action.
Right. In that regard, I know that there was a significant, flurry of activity and news that came forth when it was made public that here in Canada, the minister of the cabinet that was head of the Privy Council, Denis Lebel, had in fact been witnessed at the February 22nd, 2014 Ninth Circle ritual killing of a young boy along with the newly minted Cardinal of Montreal, who had just been elevated by the Jesuit Pope Bergoglio. And that news was made public. Have you had any fallout since then?
We have definitely been told that Denis Lebel is lying low, and Stephen Harper, of course, is out of the country. He had apparently this conference summit to go to in China and Australia, but they're definitely both avoiding reporters right now. What we had learned specifically about, however, is that Gerald Lacroix in Rome, the scuttlebutt is that he's been called in to talk to the Pope, and that his resignation might be in the offing if this thing goes further. That's the pattern right now in Rome. You notice, well, besides Pope Benedict and Tarcísio Bertone, who were both named in this court case that's up online now, and they both resigned while in office. So did Sean Brady, the Cardinal of Ireland. So did Adolfo Pichon, the head of the Jesuits. All tendered their resignation. This could be in the offing with Gerald Lacroix as well, if they can't contain the story about the Ninth Circle killing on February 22nd at the San Lorenzo Church near the Jesuit headquarters in Rome. If that can't be contained, that story's already beginning to spread in the Rome, the Italian alternative media. If they can't contain it, then I think we'll see Gerald Lacroix's resignation. Now, if he resigns, that'll have a spillover effect, I'm sure, onto the fate of Denis Lebel and, here in Canada.
Now, there was subsequently another possible false flag here in Canada on another 22nd, and that was October 22nd, when there was the possible false flag involving the killing of the possible killing or false flag of a Canadian soldier at the War Memorial. And you had mentioned some possible connections with the with Drangheta there, or some of these
Well,
other
what
issues, or
it's beginning to emerge, Alfred. Like one of the things, for example, is the very week that ITCCS learned about the Denis Labelle and Gerald Lacroix involvement in the Ninth Circle ritual was this very same week that the false flag occurred. They found out on and I'm just checking my dates here, I believe it was Monday, October 20th, that they were told from their sources in Europe, and the 22 days later is when the false flag event occurred in Rome, the shooting of that soldier. The soldier, I believe, is a Catholic from Hamilton and an Italian, Canadian. And, of course, the Hamilton mob, they have a direct pipeline to the American mafia, and that's well known. I mean, they had, back in the days of the Trudeau cabinet, John Monroe, the labor minister, had strong ties with the Italian mafia in Hamilton. It's interesting, there could be a Drangheta link there in terms of this Nathan Carrillo, the soldier who apparently was killed, may in fact not be dead. And, there's been good stuff posted so far about the false shooting in Ottawa about that. So there are definitely those links beginning to form.
yeah. Well, I know that our television station has been approached by sources in Costa Rica, where the father of the dead soldier Nathan Cirillo apparently resides, and the word indirectly from him is that the father does not believe that the son is dead,
Right.
and that initially the father was invited by the Canadian government to go to the funeral, and then there was a call that he received not to go to Ottawa on the grounds that he might run into trouble from people who wanted to sue him for non-support, which didn't make any sense at all. Now, all of this is circumstantial, and we're in the process of following up these leads, but it certainly adds to an aura of suspicion and false flag around
Right.
the October 22nd events.
Well, yeah, and don't forget, the ties between the mafia and the Catholic Church are very strong. I mean, that was told me when I was in Rome the first time by Italian politicians, that, the government, the mob, the Vatican, they're all the same people, really. That's very much the case in Canada, where the ties between Drangheta, the mafia, and the political parties and the Catholic Church are very strong. And so, it's definitely Drangheta that are involved in providing children for these rituals, the Ninth Circle rituals, in doing the human trafficking, in setting up, possibly blackmailing Denis Labelle, and, killing Cal Gadban, the Ottawa policeman, who was helping take down these Ninth Circle rituals in Montreal. And again, that happened just a few weeks before the false flag shooting, when they killed Cal Gadban in the Ottawa police station. So it's all connected, I believe, yeah.
Yeah. We encounter quite a bit of correspondence from around the world regarding the ITCCS, and one item that we received was a gentleman in Holland, I believe, and he had just gone online to a place called Rational Wiki, which appears to be a front organization that's supposed to be like Wikipedia. I've gone to it before, and it seems like it's a disinformation site to try and deconstruct or shoot down any of the truth movement. And under ITCCS, they have the typical sort of CIA and CSIS, that's the Canadian CIA, memes that, quote, the ITCCS is a one-man blog of Kevin Annett. And so I was very interested to see that now the ITCCS has opened up tribunals in Holland and in New Zealand. So could you talk about those?
Yeah, I want to thank them, actually. For a one-man movement, I'm sure it achieved a hell of a lot. So I must be Superman. I must be Superman or something. Anyway, these are the latest groups to affiliate with ITCCS. There was a notice about that just went out. There's a thing called the New Zealand Common Law Society, and it's organizing not just seminars, but they're working with the Maori people in New Zealand to try to recover land using common law courts. Very similar to in Canada, where we're standing outside Crown jurisdiction and helping, people reclaim the land. They're starting the same process there, and it involves people in the Maori community, so that's a really encouraging development. There is, of course, also a very extensive ITCCS network in Australia based out of Melbourne and Perth, and they're going to be putting their stuff up online soon. The other new affiliate is the Dutch People's Tribunal, and we've sent both of the website links to you, so we can put those up if people want to look at it.
Sure.
Two of the people involved in the Dutch People's Tribunal are Toos Nienhaus and her husband Casper. And Toos, of course, is a very famous witness who came forward initially, the first one to name the Ninth Circle, to talk about her witnessing of the killing of children by Prince Bernhard and others in the circle. And she and Casper and others are very involved in organizing it. They've already issued summonses to Mark Rutte, who is the Dutch Prime Minister, who they're accusing directly of not just involvement in the Ninth Circle and child killing, but corruption in buying off judges and silencing dissidents, and actually playing a role in the attempted incarceration of Laurent Louis, the Belgian member of Parliament, who named him as well in Parliament, and faces imprisonment now for doing it. So that's two really encouraging developments, and this, of course, is just the tip of the iceberg, because most of what ITCCS does for security and to protect witnesses and members is to operate off the radar screen. But people are now, it's a level of confidence being shown that more groups are coming up publicly now.
Right. Now, you were going to do a rather significant tour in Europe that included Germany, included many different actions in different parts in Brussels and in other areas, and that had to be called off because of certain security warnings that you had gotten about actions that perhaps either the alphabet agencies or the Vatican or Jesuit security agencies were taken. Has that situation changed at all, or what are your plans?
Well, it hasn't changed in the sense that there is, definite confirmation coming out of Europe that there is a Drangheta hit squad. They're looking for top ITCS leaders, and me as well. And, one of my advantages is I'm quite mobile, and I often will do unpredictable things and change my schedule a lot, and that's certainly helped. There was a case in July of one of the researchers working with the Common Law Court out of Brussels who simply vanished, and nobody still knows where he is. And so these are very real threats. And for example, my first response is to say, well, to hell with it, let's just keep going here. And the people out of Brussels told me, no, you cannot come right now to Europe. That's simple. Perhaps in the spring, when they're going to have more, they're actually assembling a media team. The same group that stopped the Ninth Circle ritual in Montreal on August 15th, they're going to be providing security. So in the spring, it'll be much more possible for me to be moving there. Also, the whole political climate is shifting, and the Prime Minister Holland now is on the defensive, being accused of being part of a child ring. So we, more confident that the spring is going to allow all that to happen.
Right. Now one kind of final question, and it goes to one of the defendants who was on trial in the most recent verdict out of the Common Law Court in Brussels, and that was one Jorge Bergoglio, aka Pope Francis. Now, what resulted out of the trial with Pope Benedict and the UK Queen was that Pope Benedict stepped down, and they brought in Pope Francis, and now there's a verdict that has come out based on eyewitness evidence, documentary evidence against the Jesuit Pope Bergoglio. However, Pope Bergoglio seems to have even become more daring now. He's engaging in international diplomacy and has become the bank or part of the bank for the BRICS central bank.
Yeah.
So that he is now the Vatican has been since the secret treaty of Verona, kind of the world banker of bankers. He's the ruler of rulers and the banker of bankers, which is following the tradition of the Roman emperor for more than 2,000 years. So, what is it now with Pope Bergoglio, and what strategies do the ITCCS have for enforcing their verdict?
Well, the Jesuits have, for 400 years or more, have played the game of, they always play both sides in any revolution and any political change. They're funding both sides all the time. That's clearly the case here. They're trying to create the impression they're still loyal to the Western power bloc, but also through the Deutsche Bank in Germany, putting a lot of money into this new BRIC bank that was announced a few weeks ago as kind of a rival to the World Bank. Bergoglio is an old bagman. I mean, he's well known. An example of that we just learned this week. Queen Maxima of Holland, who's married to this Willem-Alexander, she's actually Argentine, and her name was Maxime Zorreguieta. And Jorge Zorreguieta, her father, was in the Videla dictatorship. He was the agriculture minister under General Videla during the Dirty Wars. She has, and the people around her claim, according to Anne-Marie von Billenberg and others who have connections in that world, she claimed that in order to get her identification changed, because apparently Maxima was illegitimate, she needed bona fide ID to marry Willem-Alexander. She took €500,000 in a suitcase to the present Pope when he was cardinal in Buenos Aires, and paid him to get all her ID changed and to, kind of support her bid to be queen. In turn, she has personal knowledge of his involvement in the Dirty War, and it's worse than we thought. I mean, we thought at first that Jorge Bergoglio, the Pope, was simply looking looking the other way when priests were tortured, which occurred, that he had a hand in organizing the child trafficking of the kids of political prisoners. We know he did that as well. It gets even worse. He apparently had a direct role in these cult rituals. We know that from recent testimonies, but also he literally sat in on the meetings of the generals when they were planning repressive actions. I mean, he played a direct hand in the repression and the murder going on in Argentina. So this whole beneficent mask he dons doesn't at all reflect his past, and that's coming right from people around Maxima Zorreguieta, the Queen of Holland. So I mean, it's all coming out now, and I think this is definitely going to have an impact on his future.
Yeah, but in terms of the ITCCS, do you plan any special proceedings against him now that this new evidence is coming out?
Well, it all goes in when somebody's already been convicted and there's an arrest warrant out against them. There's not much more you can do but than enforce it.
I see.
Besides using this information to educate more people as to who we're really dealing with here and what we're dealing with. But again, it's a matter of getting the people on board to train them to take this action, and also making the appeal to people in the system to stand down. Like, we now have more ammunition to go to the security detachment around the Pope and others and say, look, you are committing crime, you're protecting a convicted felon, stand down. This is the approach we take to the Crown officials as well.
Now, where can people who really want to become involved with ITCCS as part of the community, either becoming trained as investigators, as enforcers, as judicial personnel, as part of the support community, how can they become involved in this?
Well, by going to itccs.org, writing to, if you want to volunteer in any aspect of this work, itccscentral@gmail.com, and read especially the manual at itccs.org, and it gives you some ideas about how to start organizing in your community, especially doing the training to become community sheriffs and people who can help enforce these warrants.
Yeah, we in fact had a meeting the other day with the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, which is a a tribunal that is getting started, whose focus will be to try the corrupt judges in the United States. And they were speaking very much of the common law sheriffs of the ITCCS, and wanting to know if the ITCCF sheriffs and if the ITCCS itself would be open to enforcement proceedings. That is, would if they could bring judgments of the International Tribunal for National Justice over to the ITCCS for enforcement by the ITCCS and its enforcement personnel. And so I said I didn't know, but I would raise it with you and with your personnel.
Well, it's a definite possibility. It would have to be taken to the directorate.
Yeah.
But that's exactly the kind of cooperation we need. The thing about the place where we're having the most success is in the United States, where, of course, there's a tradition of locally elected county sheriffs who are answerable to the electorate, not to the government.
Right.
And some of the people in Minnesota try to act prematurely. One of these sheriffs lost his job. We realized the need to get more support on board. This sheriff in particular in northern Minnesota, he was approached by a mortgage company that tried to bribe him to help evict people from their home using these fraudulent mortgages. The sheriff knew the name of the corrupt judge who was on their payroll. He refused to do it, and he lost his job over it. He had been involved in training in helping organize one of these workshops where he was trying to teach the common law to his deputies and try to get them on board to stop these fraudulent evictions. So we have to get more community support around these people who stand out like that. And that's part of the difficulty. But definitely this is one of the ways we do it. So, we always encourage people to contact us and work on that level, because that's where the change is going to happen.
Right. Funny, what do you think is sort of your overall priority or priorities now? Where is the ITCCS looking to focus its priority and its energy?
I would say, Alfred, on both the macro and the micro level. The micro level, doing that hard work on the ground of training people, equipping them to take action in their community. You got to work with people right in the community to do that. That's something we're really emphasizing right now. At the big level, we have to continue to expose what we're really facing and the nature of this cabal, the nature, kind of in all of its aspects. And we're finding more and more success on that level as well. So, the example that more people in the system are coming forward, that's a clear sign, the litmus test, that their system is coming apart, because in a crisis, that's what any institution does. They start breaking ranks. They start informing on each other because they're worried about their own skin. We're seeing that happen more and more. So that's, another really good sign.
Right. Well, we've come to the end of this segment, and are there any final words that you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Well, just that, because of the focus we've had on Vancouver and this 12-month club, we're going to have a new push in Vancouver to convene meetings, to reestablish our network. Because don't forget, Alfred, we had one of our most effective networks in Vancouver, and it got taken down and destroyed from within. The Native people were chased off or killed. The witnesses scared off. That was 2 years ago now, and we've got to rebuild, because Vancouver is a real center of this whole satanic child trafficking, murderous system, and we're going to rebuild in Vancouver. So that's for anybody in in BC or in that area in Vancouver. Then I would really encourage them now to contact us, itccscentral@gmail.com. We've got organizing committee with the Republic of Canada based there. We've got lots of stuff happening. So I really urge Vancouverites to come forward right now.
Well, thank you, and thank you for taking the time today to be with us, and we look forward to your continuing to be able to come with us and give us updates in the future as these events develop.
Thank you, Alfred. Expect another report very soon.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Good. Well, thank you very much.